I think a lot of us were raised to believe that we have to be selfless in order to be accepted and to be loved, right? And to be successful. And that has its limitations. And so I think it's time to rethink that message. And I think it's, this concept of you can do it all. Now, I think it originally had very good intentions in terms of you can do it all, but it is slowly and silently killing us. And so again, I think it's just time to reframe that message and really appreciate that one of your priorities is taking care of you. And really understanding that if you are not showing up as the best version of yourself, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, then you're doing the other people a disservice. You are doing the other people at work a disservice. You're doing your spouse a disservice. You're doing your children a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice.
Welcome to the Daughter Dearest Podcast with dynamic mother-daughter duo Simone and Olivia Canego, where they discuss the secrets of transformation and how to build bold confidence and unwavering resilience. From intimate conversations with inspiring guests to sharing their personal journeys of triumph and challenge, Simone and Olivia create a supportive space where every woman is encouraged to rise above her fears and love the woman in the mirror. Tune into the Daughter Dearest Podcast and join this special journey of connection and growth.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Daughter Dearest Podcast. I'm Simone Canego.
And I'm Olivia Canego.
And today we have a very special guest, Gia Lacqua. Gia is a widely regarded trauma-informed empowerment coach, international motivational speaker, women's leadership expert, children's book author. I did see those on the website and I thought those were so cool. Board member and girl mom. She brings nearly 2 decades of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry, leading companies, teams, and individuals through strategic change and growth, and most recently served as vice president of a Fortune 100 company. Over the past 5 years, she has transformed from a high-achieving corporate perfectionist to a mission-driven powerhouse. Her mission is to empower high-achieving women to conquer self-doubt, embark on an inner healing journey, and discover authentic confidence from within so that they can navigate their unique path to fulfillment and success. Gia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I know this is going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like from what I've read about you, you really align with the message of this podcast. So let's just dive right in.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about yourself and why you're so passionate to help other women.
Yeah. So as you heard in my bio, I was in the corporate environment for nearly 20 years, working my way up the corporate ladder. And I hit a point around 2018 where I just hit real severe burnout and I was having heart palpitations. My mental health and my physical health started to deteriorate. I really wasn't taking care of myself. I was focused on everyone else. I was traveling a lot and wasn't as present with my little kids as I wanted to be. And that really took a toll on me. And so that experience forced me to sort of step back and evaluate how I was living my life and how I was showing up. And I really had to deal with that inner conflict that I was experiencing. And interestingly enough, I did end up taking a short leave from my job. And when I was submitting with a third party, the paperwork to take my leave, I'll never forget the woman on the other side of the phone who was doing the intake for the paperwork was asking me questions about my experience and, my medical issues. And I'll never forget, she said to me, yeah, I hear that a lot. And my jaw just hit the floor. I was like, what do you mean you hear this a lot? A lot of people are taking leave because of burnout, because they're having physical manifestations of stress. And I just couldn't accept it. I'm not one to accept the status quo. And when I realized that was status quo for her, it changed my world. I said, nope, can't have it. I can't accept that. And so it really was an eye-opening moment in many ways. But at that point, I decided to get my coaching certification And, in the work that I was doing, I loved the work that I was doing, but I was really passionate about helping to develop others, both from a leadership perspective, but also, on an emotional level. And so I really felt very pulled and called to help other women either prevent that burnout cycle, where they're really hitting rock bottom, or to really help them revamp their lives to come out of that burnout.
And what you've seen recently, do you feel like, especially since COVID, it's gotten worse? It's gotten better? I mean, what have you seen with the clients that you've had?
Yeah, good question. So, I think COVID, one of the silver linings, as we know with COVID, was there's definitely more of a spotlight in terms of um, the pressure that women are under, particularly
Mm-hmm.
working mothers. And so I think the awareness of people now having hybrid work environments or more flexibility, some jobs being 100% remote, right? Being able to do things virtually, that just wasn't the world we lived in 5 years ago. And so I do think that that flexibility has created a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. But, I think while we were in the thick of it, it was brutal. It was
Yeah.
brutal for women who were trying to work a full-time job, and you have kids virtual schooling, right? And all of those experiences are really, I think, ingrained in us and unforgettable. So yeah, I think it was a real hard time for us, but I think coming out on the other side, there's real opportunity for us to create some change.
Yeah. And I look at, so even my oldest son's girlfriend, she works remotely, and it's been a blessing for them because her company actually, they probably would not have been dating
Mm-hmm.
if she wouldn't have been able to work remotely, because her company's up in New York City and they live in North Carolina. And let me tell you, when you watch this girl work, like, she does not take her phone in the office with her. She
Mhm.
is hyper focused the
Mm-hmm.
entire time, and she doesn't stop at 5. Like, she just keeps going. So sometimes I think that she might work a little bit harder working
Sure,
remotely.
sure.
But it has given them that opportunity to spend time together. So I think
Yeah,
that part is definitely a blessing.
for sure.
So I want to know a little bit more about the trauma informed certified part of your coaching, because you were a certified coach to begin with,
Mhm.
and then you took it to the next level. Can you tell us why and what that means?
Yeah. So my client population is why. Um, the trauma informed certification as a coach enables me to maintain awareness of how past traumas are showing up in the present day in the lives of my clients. And so when clients come to me, they have identified a pain point that's typically a symptom of something that's
Mm-hmm.
actually much deeper and much greater. And so in the work that we do, we obviously go beyond addressing just those symptoms to really understand the underlying cause, of the distress that they're feeling, of the conflict that they're feeling, and identify the behaviors that are no longer serving them. The other piece of this that's important to me is trauma can affect the functioning of your nervous system. And trauma actually rewires both your brain and your body. And so many high achieving women are suffering from nervous system dysregulation as a result of unresolved emotional trauma. And so for me, the training helps enable me to more effectively support my clients on their healing journey.
And I would imagine, like, just thinking about what people go through, that sometimes it can be a lot. So I'm curious, from your perspective, when you hear all these stories, how difficult is that? How difficult is it
Mm.
to, sometimes everybody's like, you have to separate your work from your personal life, but sometimes it plays in, right? So how does that work
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, I love that question, Simone. So it's funny, I do a lot of leadership coaching in addition to the one-on-one personal empowerment coaching. And there is so much overlap that I have to sort of preface every engagement with, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
okay that this is not strictly going to be 100% about how you show up at work and your interactions at work. And that's appropriate. That's very appropriate, because we have to look at everybody holistically. We have to look at who you are as a person inside of work, outside of work. And it's really important that we consider how we show up in all facets of life and how our experiences and our beliefs shape who we are today. So it's a great point that there's a ton of overlap there.
Thank you.
So I think that what I really liked about what you said, it's okay. I think that I feel like everybody needs to hear that it's okay, regardless of any subject. But I want to hear about your okay, and how did you begin your inner healing journey?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the burnout episode for me was a real wake-up call in terms of I was an over-functioning woman who was really being everything to everyone else and not taking care of myself. And it was a wake-up call for me. And I think as a high-achieving, over-functioning woman, I intellectualized a lot of my past experiences, right? So I told myself that I had dealt with them, or I had processed them, or that I had healed from them. And, as a high achieving perfectionist, a type A person, I wanted to check it off the list, right? It was like, go grocery shopping, get the car serviced, finish my PowerPoint presentation, and heal.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way. And so, I have to say that it's been a journey. It's been a very worthwhile journey, but that really forced me to take a step back and look at what needed to shift in my life, and really what were those underlying beliefs that were holding me back, right? And really undoing those and starting that process of the healing journey.
And do you feel that there's the way you are with your children is different now, like than it would have been? So for a long time, I was that. So we have, like I mentioned, we have 6 children. So I was everything to everyone else. I had completely lost myself. I was riddled with self-doubt. I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. And I did what any normal woman would do. I decided to climb a mountain. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but that's what I did actually.
Yeah.
And that moment in time was transformational for me, because I did something for myself and I put in the work. I thought about all of the things in my life that had got me to this point in time. And it was really the first time I truly believed in myself. A lot of people thought that I was being selfish by taking off for a couple of weeks and leaving my husband, who is a physician, to have to do it all. And my only response was that self-care is not selfish, that I'm a better human. I'm a better mother. I'm a better wife when I deal with what's going on in my life and not just check it off my list, because I'm a big lover of lists. Like, I love lists. But I feel like I'm much better when I take time for myself. And I feel like a lot of women struggle with that, because they do feel that guilt if, oh, I'm going to go do this, which means I'm spending 1 hour less with my family. What do you say to women that feel that way? Because like I said, I think it's a big issue.
It is a big issue. And I agree with you. I think a lot of it is societal conditioning. I think a lot of us were raised to believe that we have to be selfless in order to be accepted and to be loved, right? And to be successful. And that has its limitations. And so I think it's time to rethink that message. And I think it's, this concept of you can do it all. Now, I think it originally had very good intentions in terms of you can do it all, but it is slowly and silently killing us. And so again, I think it's just time to reframe that message and really appreciate that one of your priorities is taking care of you. And really understanding that if you are not showing up as the best version of yourself, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, then you're doing the other people a disservice. You are doing the other people at work a disservice. You're doing your spouse a disservice. You're doing your children a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice. And so I like to sort of flip it on its head. It's similar to what I tell people in leadership coaching when they have a hard time giving feedback to people on their team, negative feedback or, constructive feedback. They have a hard time delivering it. Well, if you're not doing it, then are you really being a good leader, right? How effective are you being as a leader if you're not developing them? So if you're not caring for yourself, it's the same concept in developing yourself, right? It's how do we become the best version of ourselves, or at least strive to be the best version of ourselves. And you can't do that if you're not taking that time to care for yourself. What's also interesting, Simone, about your story is, you took time off for self-care, and I'm sure it was challenging for your husband, who was a physician, to have all those other responsibilities. But I can't help but wonder, like, if the script were flipped, would people be questioning,
Absolutely not.
the
course
mother
not.
woman, right? The
No, I
mother.
will.
Oh,
Yeah, I will
he
just stand
left
up
her
and
to take care
say,
of the kids and work. Like, would anybody, you know what I mean? It's just so interesting, that dynamic.
yeah, it's still it's the fact that that's still
Yeah,
that way is a killer. But yeah, I don't think that it would have been a question at all. It would have been like, yeah, amazing, Rob, you go.
totally.
And and he is the most supportive husband. Like
Yeah.
he was, you go, I got it.
It's amazing.
You need this.
Yeah,
And I did come back a completely changed person. I mean,
sure.
obviously it's not a light switch. You still have to work every day,
Of course.
but it was life-changing for me.
I bet.
So we talked about inner healing journey, but one of the things that we love to ask on this show, because we struggle, everyone struggles. What is your biggest struggle? And not everyone has overcome the struggle that they're in, but how have you dealt with it? And what tips do you have for other women who are experiencing something similar?
Yeah. So, the hardest thing, I mean, certainly leaving my corporate career that I had worked so hard for to achieve, and shifting out of that and really redefining myself. There was a lot of deep identity work that I needed to do. I would say that was one of the hardest things that I've had to do in my life. But becoming a mother and trying to be a good mother, right, in all facets, is also one of the hardest things. But I would say, healing truly is the hardest thing, because it's a lifelong journey. It's an ongoing process, and it is challenging, and it is painful. And I think that's what deters a lot of people from going down that path, right? It's easier to sort of suppress and intellectualize, as I mentioned before. And as we know, humans are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. But I firmly believe that the only way to get past the pain is through it. And so it really is about just confronting, those deep wounds and the vulnerabilities and the insecurities, and breaking down those walls of defense that we put up. So it's really about unraveling those layers that have accumulated over time to protect us, with good reason, right? Like, there's reasons why those walls are there, but it's really hard to try to take those down when that's all we know. But I have to say, it's undoubtedly the most transformative and rewarding journey that I've ever undertaken. And it also, my personal experience, obviously helps me to support other women who are going through their own healing journey.
Absolutely. Before we started the show, we had a quick conversation about you meeting your birth father for the first time. Would you be willing to share that story with us?
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's not one that I share often. I was taken in at birth by my aunt and uncle, and I was raised by them. And so when I was graduated college, I was 22. I guess you're sort of at that age where you're doing some soul searching, and I was looking for answers. And so I felt a longing to connect with that missing part of me. And so I decided to seek out my biological father. And I found him. I set up a meeting with him and was really committed to getting the answers to my questions about my identity, about who I was. And my thinking is that at the time is that it was going to fill this void that I had, that I was looking for this external validation from a man I had never met. And by him giving me answers to questions that I had, thinking that that was going to somehow fill that void. And that realization was a turning point for me, because after that meeting, I realized, yeah, I did get some answers, but it certainly left more questions. And realized, self-love isn't about how other people see you. And it's not about other people seeing and accepting you. It's really about how you see and accept yourself. And so that was a really important lesson for me, because in the work that I do now, it's helping people to understand the most important relationship that you have is the one with yourself. And nobody else is going to come and rescue you. Nobody else is going to come and do the work for you. Nobody else is going to fill that void for you. So it was a really transformative lesson for me.
Yeah. And so I think about this often because as the mom of 6, we adopted our youngest 3. So we have 2 children that are now 20 and 16. They're from Ethiopia, and our almost 18-year-old is from South Korea. And we've talked about it many times. I mean, we're very open about things. And do you want to go back? Do you want to meet your birth family and whoever? I mean, for Ari, his birth mother had passed away. So his birth father, to our knowledge, is still alive. He has siblings there. And every time we ask, so he was 4.5 years old when he came home. And every time we ask, he's like, I remember, I don't need to go. I kind of feel like as he gets older, that's going to change. I want to say about a year ago, I asked him again and he said, I'll think about it. And I was like, okay, that's a change. That's a bit different. Millie right now, no desire. And for Noah, we'll see, because in South Korea, it's a closed adoption. So when he, in a week, 2 weeks, whatever, once he turns 18, he will be able to see if his birth mother or birth father is interested in finding out more. And, I'm going to encourage him to do it, not because, and I agree with you, I don't think it's to fill a void, but I think there are questions that you kind of want answers to. And I'm a big believer, though, that external validation doesn't do anything for us. It makes us crave that more and not look inside for it. And I also completely agree that the most important relationship that we have is with ourselves.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful. And it's a very personal decision. And I think you're right. I think there are some questions that you will get answers to, but I think it's important to set expectations for yourself in terms of what you want to get out of it, and just being really realistic about what you're going to get out of it, because it does raise more questions than answers. And it can raise other things for you, right? Other emotions and things that maybe were not there before.
yeah. And I mean, we'll see. It's really their decision. It's
Sure.
not my decision, and I will support whatever they decide. I just have always said to them, it's for them. It's not worrying, oh, am I going to get my feelings hurt? No, I want them to know as much as they can know. I want them to be loved by as many people who can love them. And that's all that matters to me.
Yeah. And I think, you're right in the sense of just letting them feel empowered and making them feel empowered to make that decision for themselves is so beautiful.
Liv, it's on you.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard, first of all, because I don't have kids, so I don't know how to relate to that. But I actually was very interested in what you said about redefining yourself after leaving the corporate world. So I am entering the corporate world. So I'm a business major right now, and I'm going to law school next year.
Amazing.
And I have a lot of
Congratulations.
friends that are starting off in the corporate world, and I can tell you that I
Yeah.
know that their lives in 3 months will be easily defined by their jobs. And to be quite honest, you don't see a lot of women get to high places in the corporate world. And I I mean, how do you balance that? How do you find that, I guess?
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to wrap your head around of we're told to do all these things, but also have a successful career at the same time. And it seems like there has to be sacrifices made.
Yeah. It's the $1 million question for sure. It's a great one. And I think it's important as we're raising the next generation, right? Looking at your generation and the younger kids, the younger girls, in terms of setting those realistic expectations. I mean, there's a couple of things that one is I don't think as children, as girls, we were taught here's how you balance a life with a career, and here's
Hmm.
how you balance having kids, with your job. Nobody teaches you that, right? Nor does anybody prepare you for it. And so you just sort of have to learn as you go. I think that's one is, how can we better equip girls and young women to prepare for those realities and recognizing that life is not linear, right? And sort of we have this concept in our mind of, oh, we have to work up the corporate ladder, and by this age I was in my head, it's like I have to hit VP before I'm 40, and
Hmm.
I had certain mile markers in my head, and I hit those mile markers, and I have to tell you, like, there was a feeling of satisfaction that my hard work paid off, but then I was on to the next thing. Right? I wasn't able to really appreciate where I was, and I didn't feel fulfilled because I was just sort of, again, checking those boxes.
Yeah.
And so I think understanding that you can have multiple careers as a woman. You can take a break from your career to raise kids and then go back.
Hmm.
You can start in corporate and then become an entrepreneur. Nobody tells you those things.
Yeah.
And so I really think it's important, just the awareness and education around the reality of the world that we live in, and that you are going to have to balance self-care with raising kids and maintaining a relationship and bringing in money. Right. And so understanding that it's a puzzle, like you have to juggle the pieces. It's like a Jenga.
Hmm.
You have to know when to pull out certain pieces and when to put them back, and when to pull back on your career and when to push on the gas. And it's not going to be a linear path. So I think it's really just resetting expectations for the next generation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I honestly, I think a lot of my friends and I have the mindset, especially right now, well, it's either having a career or kids.
Mm,
And that's like a terrifying thing as a
mhm.
21-year-old to be like, okay, well, do I go? Because obviously, I mean, not obviously, I'm sure there are some 21-year-olds that do want kids. I don't right now. So it's like, okay, do I go full force with this career, or do I start, looking to marry and find someone that have kids with? It's a really exhausting thing. And it's like society wasn't built for women to have careers. So now that we are, it's like, okay, well, you can't do it the way a man did it because they get a bunch of benefits you don't.
I mean, what you said is so spot on, Olivia, in terms of the corporate structure was built for men. And the problem is that even when women do work their way up to those C-suite positions, we are still conforming
Hmm.
to the model that's been there forever. And we're trying to fit in to that mold. And it does not set us up for success.
Yeah.
And so the biggest piece of advice I would give young women your age is, how do we think differently about those corporate constructs, and how do we challenge the status quo? And it's not just about perks in the workplace,
Yeah.
right? Or it's not just about a hybrid work environment. It's more than that. There's so much more there that we have not explored and tapped into as a society, that I would challenge, individuals to really think about.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
It's a really daunting thing.
It is. It is. And rightfully so. And so, I mean, it's a mountain to climb. And I do hear more and more of the younger generation saying, I don't want kids, right? Because it is so scary.
Yeah.
And that's
'Cause-
fine. I mean, it's a personal decision. That's your choice. But I hate to hear the fact that it's like, oh, I can't have a career and have kids. And that's
Yeah.
the reason why, right?
That I will say, I think that is a thought on every single one of
Yeah.
my friends' minds right now is because obviously, like, I have my mom and with an amazing career, but it's not what you think of in the typical corporate sense. It's not like 9 to 5 job, you go home, and let's be real, it's like 8 to 7 these days.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's just like graduating from business school, you're told all these things, and it's like, okay, but now I want to live my life. I don't want to just be a job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a big part of it. I think so many of us tie our identity to our career, right? We are our job. And it's like if you had to introduce yourself without talking about what you did for work, without using your job title,
Mm.
right? I 6, 7, 8 years ago would have been at a loss for words
Hmm.
because I was my corporate job and I was a mom and that's it, right? Like there was like nothing else there. And so it was really that journey of self-discovery of getting back to like who I was and understanding, making sure I was doing the things that fulfilled me and made me happy. And so it is an important point of, really having a strong sense of identity and that self-worth, because what we talked about with the over-functioning is a lot of it comes from trying to prove ourselves,
Hmm.
right? You're striving to prove yourself. And then at some point, you're like, what am I trying to prove? And who am I trying to prove it to? And so I think if you can catch that on the front end, right? You're going to be in such a better place and making sure that you are working towards your own definition of
Hmm.
success.
So it's interesting. I have a friend she's a partner at one of the big accounting firms. She's been with them for, I don't know, 20 years now. And when she first started, and not at that same location, but when she first started, there was a rule that women had to wear skirts and nylons.
Wow.
Like, can you imagine? Like,
No,
you couldn't even wear pants, right? And that's not that long ago, right?
it's crazy to me because I don't remember the last time I put on anything besides pants. Like I don't really wear skirts, so
Yeah.
I know. And it's so funny because I talk about, almost 20 years ago when I started in the corporate world, I did, even though there was like, this concept of women wearing skirts and the nylons, there was also in my head this concept of how can I be more like a man?
yeah,
Mm,
that's a huge one for us.
Right?
yeah.
Like, how do I act like a man? How do I think like a man? And so I'll be honest, at the time, a lot of it was hiding a lot of my authentic self because required me to not be empathetic, to not be vulnerable, right? To not wear pink nail polish,
Mhm.
to not look too pretty. And it's so interesting now because now we talk about leadership and the key to a successful leader when we look at those top, 5 or 6 traits or qualities, it's being empathetic, it's being compassionate, it's being vulnerable. And my mind was just blown, right? That like, wait a minute, those are all the things I suppressed when I came to work.
Hmm.
So it is fascinating. So I would also challenge, that's why I think the authenticity is so important, to be true to who you are and make sure that your voice is heard and that you are bringing your unique superpowers to wherever, whatever work environment that you're in.
One of the things that I've been doing a lot of research on, because this is what I talk about all the time, is confidence. And I'm a big, big believer that we build it from the inside out, that it is not something that is just, you just have it. I think for many years, people thought that I was a very confident person because that's what they saw on the outside. I felt like I had to hold it together. I mean, I had 6 kids. Like, I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't cry about things. I couldn't, like, what's our favorite movie? Steel
Oh, I
Magnolias.
was about to. I don't know what you were gonna say. That's my favorite movie. You have
I
a
know,
different
but
one.
okay, ours together is Steel
Okay,
Magnolias.
fine.
And we can watch it like 20 times and we still cry every
Yeah.
time. 20 years ago, I wouldn't cry. Like, I had to be like stoic and all of these things. And that to me is not confidence, right? That is just this facade that so many people put on to get through their day.
Mhm.
So what do you think about confidence? I mean, I know I've read some stuff about the inner confidence that you've talked about, but from the inside out, what are the important things that people need to be thinking about and understanding that when someone is coming forward and they appear to be really confident, they might really be struggling on the inside?
Yes. And it's a great point that you bring up. And I believe that confidence, a lot of times what I hear from women leaders is I need to have the knowledge, the experience, the expertise in order to feel confident. And there is an aspect of that, knowing what you're doing going into something, but that you're not going to be in that situation all the time. And so where do you draw confidence from if you don't have the knowledge or expertise? And so that is where I believe the inner self-worth comes into play in terms of knowing who you really are at your core, knowing what superpowers you bring to the table, because what you bring to the table is going to be unique and different from everybody else who's sitting at that table, and really owning it and sitting in it and knowing that no matter what challenge you're up against, that that's what you bring to the table. It's your uniqueness. It's your authentic self, and really being comfortable with who you are at your core. And I think that's where true inner confidence comes from.
I'm a big fan of, again, something that I wouldn't have talked about 10, 15 years ago. I'm a big fan of positive affirmations. And I have
Yeah.
different strategies that I use. Are there strategies that you use to help people when they're struggling with confidence?
Yeah. So I do like affirmations. A couple things. I think that I'm a visual person, and I know a lot of women are. And so I think it's, also finding what image, word, graphic, piece of art speaks to you in terms of what evokes some sort of confidence. And so I tell people, whether it's a piece of jewelry, sometimes it's a necklace, sometimes it's a bracelet, sometimes it's a picture on a wall, a vision board, sometimes it's, you could save a picture on your phone, right, as your wallpaper, something that you will look at visually day and night, similar to an affirmation. You could put it on your mirror in your bathroom, in your closet door, that will give you that feeling. It's like, how do we capture that feeling, that essence of confidence where you're like, yes, this is it. This is me owning my worth. And just having that visual reminder and representation that you can go back to multiple times a day, and just give yourself that little boost.
I love that. I haven't thought about it like that before, but I think I do use that a lot without even knowing that I'm using
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I love just laying it out there. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What are your tips to overcoming burnout?
It's a big one. So, overcoming burnout, I think that's where we need to really take a step back, because burnout is not just that you're stressed out and you have too much on your plate. It's
Hmm.
actually the opposite. It's actually you're depleted. You don't have anything left to give. And so that's the point where you have to take a step back and really evaluate, what are your true priorities in life, and understanding what is most important to me, what is non-negotiable for me, and really doing an inventory of kind of, where am I spending my time and energy? Where am I spending my time? Where am I spending my energy? What's energizing me? What's draining me? Looking at your priorities, and am I actually aligned to those priorities? Looking at your core values, right? What is really important to me? What do I need to have in my life in order to feel happy and fulfilled? And what we find is that most of the times our actions and behaviors are not aligned to those core values. And it's not aligned to, what we're doing and how we're spending our time and energy is not aligned to what we want. And that's where that inner conflict comes. And so it's really, how do we align? How do we align the values to the beliefs and the behaviors? And the other thing that's really challenging, and this is where I truly believe external support is so critical, whether it's therapy, whether it's a coach, um, our beliefs are very much held by our ego. And so it is super, super hard to undo some of those long-standing limiting beliefs that drive our self-sabotaging behavior, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, the procrastination, the self-doubt, the low self-worth, the hypervigilance. A lot of that, they're long-standing ingrained beliefs, and it's hard to undo that on our own. And so that's where I truly believe the value of having that external support is critical.
And I think in so many things, we talk about this often on the podcast, that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need help. Like we are all
Yeah.
human. We can't do it all by ourselves. We like to talk about the idea of being self-made. And I know people work really hard. I mean, that's not the way I see it, though. I feel like doesn't matter how hard you're working, typically, and that's overgeneralization. There's always somebody that is helping you in some regard. So even if it's your housekeeper, like someone is helping you get through your day so that you can, your neighbor, your best friends, picking up your kids from school, something like that.
Exactly.
So that idea to me of that, we need that outside support to be able to move through our days.
Yeah, and I think same thing, before you talked about being stoic and not showing emotion and not being vulnerable, right? Not crying in front of other people. It's so true because it's the same concept here as we were sort of conditioned to not be emotional, not be vulnerable, and don't ask for help,
Right. Don't
right?
ask for help. It's a
Don't ask for
weakness.
help. You
Yeah.
give help,
Right.
you help others, but you do not ask for help. And that is such a false belief. Right. And so I think it's undoing some of that learning and those deeply held beliefs that really are preventing us from growing and thriving.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing that we offer help, we can't ask for it. And we show respect, but we don't show ourselves respect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is what we're taught. So when we're talking about what we need to teach our daughters, right, that we're taught to respect our elders, our teachers, your parents. But I don't remember ever anyone telling me like the most important thing is to respect yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to add that piece to the learning equation for our girls.
For
I tell
sure.
her
And
all the
what
time.
and what you accept from others, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And setting those boundaries for yourself, which is so hard.
Yeah. So we're getting kind of close to the end, but wanted to ask you about, since we have this mother-daughter show, who's a woman in your life that has really inspired you?
There's been a lot of women that have inspired me. You know, I there's a lot of famous women and authors and that I can think of, but honestly, I think some of the women that I actually have personal connection with have been more inspiring to me because they've taught me through not just words, but through their own actions, um, how to challenge the world that we live in. And so I'm thinking about like female mentors in the workplace, other women that I've had the pleasure of working with, and just really learning from each of them and their unique perspectives and their unique experiences. And I would say they inspire me when they are able to step out of that box that society has put them in, when they're able to do something different, whether it's, wearing a pink suit, a
Right.
pink pantsuit,
Yeah.
right? Or coming up with some really bold idea and putting it out there in a room full of men. It's just bringing that vulnerability into the workplace. So those are the women that I think about in terms of the ones that have inspired me, the ones who challenge the status quo and challenge the norms.
I try to challenge. My mom was a big challenger.
Yeah.
She became a physician in 1961. There were
Wow.
120 people in her medical school class, and
Oh.
5 of them were women. And I can tell you that she is so inspiring in had struggled her whole life with self-doubt, never felt like she was enough. And she's about to turn 85 and she'll still be so hard on herself. And I'm like, you have no idea what you have accomplished, do
Yeah.
you? Right.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one because yeah, I always say, look back at all these things. I mean, she learned how to fly a plane when she was 18 years old, right?
Wow.
Like she moved in with an orthopedic surgeon to take care of his kids so that she could save money and go off to college. But it just shows that it doesn't matter what you've gone through, that we all have struggles and we have to deal with them. We have to deal with things so that we're able to move forward and see how amazing we really are.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible story to hear of your mother. And, it reminds me of this reality that the way other people see us is very different than the way we see
Mm.
ourselves. And so, one question is kind of like, how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile our self-identity with our external perception? Because they can be so different. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting, right? If you really took inventory of how other people saw you, your
Right.
self-esteem would go up. We don't typically do that. And so, yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, your truth is not necessarily the truth, right? It's
Yes,
what
Hmm.
you're telling yourself is not what other
absolutely.
people see. And so we need to try to align those because we do bring so many, each one of us brings so many amazing things to the world. I truly believe that.
Absolutely.
So, Liv, over to you. Tell me about what do we got for the day? So, we usually finish up our episodes reading from Olivia's really fun calendar, gives us a quote to live by. We'll see. We'll see what it is today.
Yeah. Okay. So today is build something new, an entirely new approach to living your life. Make the past obsolete.
Hmm.
It's a
That's a
good
good
one.
one. Yeah.
I love that.
It really is a good calendar. Like it
Yeah, it
seems
really
like,
is. It's good advice for every day.
yeah. And I always say that to the kids too, that, okay, the past is in the past. Learn something, move forward. You can't change what already happened. Like you can't go back in time. And if you dwell on it, you can't move forward.
Yeah,
Any failure we have, it's a stepping stone to success. So just got to keep on walking on those stones to move forward.
absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
great one. I love that. And it's also, it's hard to start over. And people think, oh, well, if I start over, I'll lose everything that I've worked towards. And that's just not accurate, right?
Hmm.
You have the experience and the knowledge that you built to take with you, right? And it's not starting over, but sometimes we see that as a failure
Hmm.
and it keeps us paralyzed in that fear, that state of fear where it's like, oh, I can't do something different, even though you feel compelled or
Yeah.
you feel that calling or that itch. And so, so I love that. I love that quote.
Yeah. So anything else that you want to leave our listeners with? Any other tips, any other advice, any other thoughts?
Yeah, the last thing I would say, I mean, I think this has been an incredible conversation. So, thanks for having me on the show. I would say, one thing I like to tell clients is during those difficult times when we're going through a particularly challenging time in our life, I think we all can get stuck in the victim mode of thinking, why is this happening to me? Right. And we always think worst case scenario when we start spiraling. And so, to be honest, I've not always been an optimistic and a positive psychology person, but I will say that this has been sort of life changing. And so I recommend everybody, think about a way they can incorporate this into their lives. In those moments, it's a reframe of instead of saying, why is this happening to me? It's really thinking about what is this shift trying to teach me? What is the universe trying to teach me? Or how am I being redirected? Because I think we get so mired in the moment that it's really hard to step back and step away from that and look at the big picture and say, well, wait a minute. maybe there's a life lesson here. Maybe there's an opportunity here. Maybe I am, even though this hurts and this is extremely painful at the moment, there's a reason why I'm being redirected in this other way. And so just trying to look at it from that other perspective can really change your outlook on things.
I do think that's so important. I think that there's probably multiple times a day that I need to reframe things, and I do. I have my little way of doing it, but I love the idea of kind of asking yourself a different question. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really helpful it's a really helpful way to just kind of move through it in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you so much. Tell our listeners where they can find you. We'll have everything in the show notes, but tell everybody what's the best way to get in touch with you, reach out to you, all the good things.
Sure. So I love to hear from listeners. Feel free to reach out with questions, comments, feedback, things you'd like to hear about on the Daughter Dearest podcast. Or my podcast, which is Your Future Starts Now. You can check it out on Apple Podcasts. And you can visit my website at gialacqua.com. That's GIALACQUA.com. I'm on Instagram at Gia Lacqua, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well.
Great. Again, everything will be in the show notes, and thank you so much. It was such a great conversation. And what I really loved about it is it's always interesting for me and Olivia because we do have very different perspectives because of our age difference. And
Sure.
it's so nice to like have different ideas for both of us come out of a conversation. So thank you for that.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love the concept. I love the work that you're both doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Daughter Dearest podcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Daughter Dearest podcast with Simone and Olivia Canego. We hope this episode has made your day just a little bit brighter and given you the inspiration you need to confidently go about your week. Always remember to be authentically you. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And feel free to connect with them on Instagram at Daughter Dearest Podcast, at Simone Canego, and at Olivia Canego. Till next time.